Every great company starts with someone who says, there's gotta be a better way. This is the show for founders who go against all odds and push through when the odds say quit. The leaders who trade certainty for the pursuit of their vision and build something remarkable. This is Audacity of Entrepreneurs, where serial entrepreneurs, exited founders, executives, and their advisors have unfiltered conversations about what it really takes to build a company. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Audacity of Entrepreneurs. This is a podcast that is very dear to me in terms of its concept because it will speak the language of entrepreneurs. And I hope that anybody listening or watching will identify with it. And my guest today is one of those entrepreneurs who is a veteran entrepreneur. And he first had his teeth cut working for Fortune 50 companies like Apple, HP, AT&T, Symantec, Kodak, Microsoft, and Bank of America, and others. And once he's had enough of it, working in corporate world, he then decided to get into startup, and he did that several times successfully. Today, he is the founder and CEO of iBridge, which is a consulting company specializing in team and leadership development. And when he's not working, which is not very often because he's always working, he's a private pilot. He loves trail and motocross, riding on his Yamaha WR450, weight training, and golf. And also, he's an expert level on Xbox. With that, everybody, meet my guest, Jeff Harnois. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Nick, it's a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here.
I love talking to entrepreneurs. Storytelling is always there. And the best part of it is we speak from experience, so that experience share and everything is authentic. So what we're going to do, everybody, today is we're going to get straight to the point of building a business. Now, we don't build businesses to make money, but money is the KPI of how successfully we are doing it. And of course, that revenue generation comes from being able to sell. So today, we're going to talk about how an entrepreneur goes about selling successfully in a consulting environment, which is something Jeff is an expert at. So he's going to share with us. Here is our agenda today. We're going to get into how you assess your prospect. We're going to then move on to how do we get to know the need? How do we uncover what we can actually propose because it is a need of the person we're pitching to? Then creating a solution, real time, and an offer that goes with it based on the need that we hear. And this is going to be almost like a deep study of the selling activity, which gives you the main feel that helps the business grow. So also, Jeff is someone that you can hear from on his podcast. So I would highly recommend, but today you're going to get a little sample of what it's like to be hearing from the master. So Jeff, so where do we start? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think probably where we're not going to start today is on lead generation, not quite as much focus on prospecting. I'd like to pick up the sales process, once we're starting to have maybe that initial conversation with a prospect.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do in my business is something called a psychometric. A psychometric is a psychological measurement of people. It measures their personality. And when we understand the psychometric on someone, the psychological profile on someone, we understand their communication preferences. We understand things about how they want to be sold to. We understand their buying signals or resistance signals, objections. it allows us to sort of know in advance how to approach and how to move a conversation forward pretty well. And so, because that's a part of the business that I operate around executive development and executive communications, the selling process is benefited from that in several different ways. Knowing how best to pitch, knowing how to handle objections, knowing how, and maybe more importantly, when to go for a close, and then how to drive the process all the way through to an actual order. And so when I think about, the approach to assessing the prospect, that's usually the first place that I start.
So this is, as entrepreneurs, we have strengths in different areas, right? And most entrepreneurs I've come across, they like wheeling and dealing. They're deal makers. So I'm not one of those, believe it or not. I like systems. I like building stuff, creating stuff. But as an entrepreneur, in order to build a business, you have to know how to do pretty much everything so that you can get in there and do it. So when I started studying this is exactly where it started. It's understanding the prospect. And you tell me what you think. What I was presented to learn was, are you familiar with Carl Jung?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you know the terminology that he created, archetypes?
I'm not as familiar with archetypes. I know he's the grandfather of Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
And so I'm well educated on that particular psychometric. But let's talk about archetypes.
Yeah. So I was given this material about buyer archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what you were talking about. You have to understand how to pitch, blah, blah. So this concept centers around 4 different types of buyers. And it goes through each one of those. First one is, of course, each one has a name. First one is called the warrior. Warrior is the logical buyer. He wants to understand all the details. Prove it to me. They often interrupt. So these are interesting kind of signals that you see. So if you see someone, oh, that's a warrior. You know what you don't do with a warrior? You do not let them take control, because they like to take control. And you never let them end the call without nailing the next call. You do not give them the price until they buy the premise in the first place, and they will scrutinize all the way. And so that's one. Another one he calls the jester. Jester is all about the journey. What's it like to be working with you? Am I going to have fun? Is it going to be? So don't give numbers, don't give facts and figures, no interest whatsoever. It's about the experience. And another one is kind of lives in the past. He got burned so many times. How do I know this is going to work? It doesn't matter. And the last one is they call it the wizard. The wizard is the hardest one. Want to know everything. And this is a clue. If they say right off the bat, I'm looking at 3 other offers, that's a wizard. Now, the thing about the wizard, which is the hardest sale, they're not going to want to be pushed around. They're not going to make a decision right away. They're going to want to take their time and things like that. And the good thing about the wizards and the healers, it's called the healer, the one that lives in the past, that once you close your deal, they're going to stay with you a long time, because they don't have the courage to go elsewhere and go through the whole thing because it's a lot of work. So I would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah. So this modeling actually is a lot like a product that I use called Everything Disc, which is a disc-based model, which also has the 4 archetypes that you mentioned. They're labeled different, but they're the exact same people. Yeah. So let's get into each one of them. Before we do, I want to insert a perspective here. Anytime that I'm working with new salespeople, actually, let me give you this context. I'm responsible for almost $1 billion worth of revenue acquisition over my career from companies that I've worked for and companies that I've owned. And so the sales component of this is personal for me. It's passion of mine. And because it's all very human focused, it's just right in the middle of my lane. And so I wanted to insert that to insert this. It's really good to understand who your target is. And we can use these archetypes, we can use other models. But one of the important elements that you cannot overlook is, what is your type? How do you like to sell? How do you normally communicate? And it's important to understand both sides of that equation if you really want to be successful. The reason is, it's not enough to just know and understand or be able to recognize the archetype that you're selling to. You also have to understand what adaptations do you have to make to be successful with that archetype. That's the key. That's the secret sauce.
I never thought about it that way. So if you are because you could clash, right? You could clash with the person, and then they would feel that they are not being heard. Like, for example, if you're talking to a healer who's been burnt several times, and you simply tell them, well, there are no guarantees. This is what you have. This is the last thing he wants to hear, right?
In fact, I can tell you what the clashes are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the clashes are warrior and healer. They're directly opposite each other. And wizard and journey in Carl Jung's archetypes, those are directly clashing. They don't think the same way. They don't process information in the same way. Their information needs are completely different. What's going to motivate them to buy or reject are completely different. And so again, understanding how to adapt to those styles is where the key is.
Yeah. So tell me your take on this thing. All sales are emotional.
No.
Yeah.
No,
because it depends on
true.
which one, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So in fact, let's use that and take it in another direction. Of the 4 types, there are 2 overarching categories to think about. One of those categories is transactional, and the other category is relational. 2 of the types are very interested in the details of the transaction. They're going to apply logic in their decision-making process. 2 of these types are going to be very relational. They're going to put as much weight on the relationship as they are the product or the price or the offer that's in place. And if you don't know the difference, you're going to get it wrong.
Right, because you're going to talk about things that they don't care about.
Let's reframe that. You're going to talk about things that are not persuasive to them.
Yes. Yeah. It will come across as a pitch.
It'll come across as a pitch. It'll come across as disingenuous. It'll come across as unappealing.
Yeah. In fact, I tell you my personal experience with that. I did that. I did not know this. And so what happened was there was this gentleman, fairly senior, and I presented the solution. He was wizard, completely focused on, but he was also a cross between a wizard and a healer.
Yeah.
Because he tried and he was taken for a ride. So total distrust, total focus on how do I know this is going to work? And so towards the end of the first call, I said, listen, you understand, this is my company. I'm not on commission. This is all about what I came up with. And therefore, you can take whatever I'm saying to the bank. I've done it myself. I've tried it. I know how it works. So he said, okay, thank you. I appreciate blah, blah, blah. And then we scheduled the second call. I come to the second call, which was supposed to be when he would have decided. He said, okay, I'll make my decision. I'll review everything. And then on the next one. So I'm thinking, okay, this is already done. And we're going to send the agreement, blah, blah. So I come to the second call and he says, not ready.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not expecting it. And I said, tell me why, and blah, blah. Of course, I wanted to. And also, frankly, it would help him. But nevertheless, and he says, you're trying to close on me. You're trying to get commission.
Yeah.
I said, this is not about commission. This is I don't care about commission. No, I'm not. So he just reacted.
Yeah. So the warrior and the wizard are on the same side of the transactional equation. They are naturally skeptical. And so you may have a problem with their skepticism, but if you don't know how to adapt to it, you're never going to be able to persuade and influence, right?
So what is the best way to handle this?
So let's go through each one. We'll start with the warrior. The warrior is very motivated by success. It is the most competitive of the four types. And so you want to sell them a win.
Okay.
Yeah. What are you trying to get done? Here's how my product, my service, my offering helps you win. By the way, you have to come in with lots of confidence and there's a line between assertive and aggressive. You want to be really close to that line when you're selling to these folks because they see that as strength. And when they see weakness, they're repelled by weakness. And so they want to see someone who's going to stand their ground, somebody who's going to get in the fight, somebody who they can trust to help them win. And so that has to be your mindset in your language, in your positioning, in your offer. Everything has to be focused on how do I help you win? With a lot of confidence, I can get it done. If we move over to the jester, this side of the equation is very relational. They're very relationship oriented. This is not a very detail oriented person. They want to know, can we get this done? Will we have a good time? And are people going to love it when we do it? And so you, in fact, are selling them an experience. What kind of experience are people going to have? By the way, if you're the jester and you make this decision, are people going to love you because you made the decision? They crave that. And so knowing that you can position in that way, that you're helping them win, but you're going to use it from the framing of people are going to love what you've done here. This is going to be good for your audience, your customers, your company, your employees. It's going to be good for you and all of these reasons. So think of this as humanizing your offering, talking about the benefits from a human perspective, and then being very both optimistic and positive in your approach.
So you'll be building your legacy. This will be your legacy. You'll people will love it, and you'll change. You'll touch people's lives, and then you will make an impact.
You're going to be known for the person who changed everything in a positive way, right?
Oh, God, yeah, I can see that. I've had one of those. And by the way, they talk quite a bit. You cannot talk much. They'll talk all the time, right?
Actually, here's something that's interesting, Nick, and I'm glad you said that because this is a little more subtle, but it's important to know. I'm a combination of a healer and a wizard. That's my style. And so respect and politeness are things that are important to me. And so I have a tendency to not talk over people. But with the warrior and the jester, they want that interruption. They want that what feels like conflict to me because for them, it's an energy source. When you're talking and they're talking, they see that as excitement and enthusiasm. I see it as disrespectful, right? We are not the same. And that's why it's important to know who you are and what your preferences are. Yeah. I have to be able to say, just because I'm not comfortable doing that, not only are they comfortable with it, they kind of need it for you to show your passion and your energy and your commitment. And you're going to be talking over each other and it's going to be rough. And I don't normally work that way. And so I have to give myself permission to get into their native habitat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when you said that, it reminded me of one of my all-time favorite actors, Walter Matthau.
Oh, yeah.
Him and Jack Lemmon. I mean, the
Oh,
two
and
of
The
them,
Odd Couple?
oh my God, not just The Odd Couple, any movie they made, and also individually as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Walter Matthau, and I saw so many of their interviews with Johnny Carson and
Yeah.
Walter Matthau, always telling stories. So he said that in his own way, he said one day in an interview, they don't like me very much, he said, because I'd like to argue with other actors.
Mm-hmm.
He said, why do you want to? Because when I argue with them, their emotions come out. And I like that. So I like to argue with people. So he like took pride in it. So that's the exact opposite of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you think of the warrior, I mean, notice this, watch this connection, Nick. When you're talking to a warrior, they want to know, are you tough enough to handle this?
Yeah, yeah.
And so they're going to press you partially because they want to see how you react. If you're someone who comes in and they pressure you and you fold, you might not be the right partner for me, kind of a thing. Do you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. In fact, this is the test in ancient cultures. So if you go like Asia and the Middle East, and they test you because they
Yeah.
they bow to the sword. So
Yeah.
power is important. That's why it's easy to flip things into, because human psychology, right? That reflects in politics. That's where the conflict or the conflict resolution
Yeah.
is. So you have to understand who you're dealing with and what they value. Okay, so once you have this, now you have a pretty good idea about your assessing, as we put under the heading,
Right.
assessing the prospect. So now you know who you're dealing with, and you can adjust your style. So this means really there is no one way to pitch a service. You have to understand who you're pitching to and then adjust accordingly.
100%. I love that you're making this observation because that's a home run. I said it earlier and I want to say it again for emphasis. You must understand, let's call it the personality, the type that you're pitching to, if you want to ensure that you're going to be successful. If you don't know, if you're guessing, or if you're ignoring it completely, you have at best a 50-50 shot at connecting, right? And really being influential. Now, your product may do some of the work, your offer may do some of that work, but if you really want to guarantee your success, be able to read that individual and then adapt to their style.
Yeah. And frankly, there is no, so people may say, okay, how do I know? I'm not going to give them a test. So I asked this question, and I was told that that's the best part of these buyer types. You can tell from the questions they ask, from their style. So if they are interrupting, if they are detailed, or they are focused on the fun aspect of the
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly. Yeah.
You can tell. So it's not really, we don't have 10, 12 of these. It's only 4.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of them are on one side and 2 of them on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make those adjustments. Of course, you present your solution, but you emphasize what matters to them.
Exactly right. So let's expand on that one. A good salesperson obviously is also someone who's very knowledgeable. What are they knowledgeable about? Well, they're knowledgeable about their product. They're knowledgeable about their service or their offering. They're knowledgeable about how things get done. But a really good salesperson is knowledgeable also about their prospect and their business and their mission and their vision and their goals. And so the language is about how do we make that happen versus, will you buy my product for $2.99?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's just a much different conversation. But being able to adapt to those buying signals, I want to come back to this. People tell you who they are without telling you who they are. There's a statistic out there that says something like, and I know this isn't the right number, but it's really high. 86% of communication is nonverbal. People are signaling all the time who they are. You just have to be able to, you have to have the decoder ring to know what it means, and then more importantly, what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what those numbers are. It's the 7% rule. And it's also known as the Mehrabian rule. It's a psychologist called Professor Mehrabian created this. He says that communication between two people, 7% of the message is in the words they use. 38% is in the tone of their voice. 55% is in their body language.
There you go. There you
So,
go.
in fact, I make this part of my company culture. I say we do not have difficult conversations via text, via chat, or just voice. Always turn your webcam on.
Yeah.
So, and same thing applies in the sales conversation. You have to really read into how they are reacting as you are giving facts and figures.
Right.
Yeah, are their eyes glazing over?
Right.
Or they're getting more animated when you talk about, the whole process and how much fun and blah, blah, and playing games, etc. Right?
Well, yeah. And so let's finish the horn. We started to go around the horn. And so we talked about the jester and what they're looking for. The healer person, they're looking for safety. They want to know that they're about to make a good decision. They want to hear you say, this is a good decision for you. They want you to investigate and know enough to say that and know that it's true and have the confidence that it's true. So they're also relational, but they're very cautious in their approach. I wouldn't use the word skeptical here. They're generally more warm and open. They're more relational, but they're going to be very cautious. If we slide over to the wizard, this is your data team. This is the group that wants every detail that you have available, right? And if you're a warrior type, you're going to be super impatient with this person. It's like, just make a decision. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to push them out of the buying box because you're going for close too fast. So what do they want? The wizard wants to know that you know what you're talking about because information and knowledge is a priority for them. So they only want to work with highly competent people. They only trust people that are highly competent. That means their test is going to look like request for information, request for information, request for information, right? And if you try to go to close too soon for them, they're simply going to say no. Yeah. Same thing with the healer, right? If you try to push them for a decision too soon, they're going to default to no, thank you. I don't really care how good your offer is. If you haven't achieved my need for information around safety, that this is a good decision, that people aren't going to be disappointed in the decision that I'm about to make or the service you're about to offer, then you'll get it. That's the green light to go for the close. Yeah. So let's pivot back to the need component, because that was the next thing on your list.
Yes, that's what I was going to get to. So now that we've completely identified the buyer, uncovering the need, talk to us about that.
Yeah, in my world, and I think this is true for a lot of folks, when a prospect comes to me and tells me about their need, what they're really sharing with me are the symptoms of the problem. People aren't getting along. Leadership isn't very effective. Trust is really low in the organization. Communications aren't working very well. We're not hitting our numbers. It's like, okay, those are actually symptoms. What's really happening in the organization? And so if you can get something akin to something a little closer to root cause, if you can get some identification around that, then your ability to close goes up exponentially because you're solving the actual problem. We're not treating a symptom. We're solving a problem. And that is a much different perspective. But I think the other element is sometimes the prospect doesn't know what the root cause is. And so we talk about the symptoms, but then we talk about causation in a way that says, our expertise is going to help you uncover what the root cause of the problem is. So one of our value propositions is helping you be able to see and know what the root cause problem is so that we can actually solve it and solve it completely. And I think that's really compelling. One of the other things that I often do is I'll ask this question, what's it like to work here? Or what's it like to work with this product or service? How's that going? what problems does that create for you, your team, your company, your organization? What would happen if that were solved? And now what we're looking for is, what is their decision motivation? If I solved this tomorrow, what good things would happen? Well, our revenue would increase. We'd see better margins. Our leadership would be more effective. We'd see better employee engagement. We'd see better retention. It's like, okay, now I know what language I need to use to be able to close you.
Okay, so this brings me to something that is actually, it not only uncovers the buyer type, but also it gives you the clues on how to address. So, and the question is, what is the goal? Why do you want this? And then if you achieve it, what does it mean to you?
How does it affect your business, right?
Yeah, well, okay. How does it affect your business? Will then focus on the business. It will condition the person to respond for the business. But they may not be interested in the impact on the business, but what the business will enable them to do. And they may focus on that. For example, they may say, oh, if I do this, our revenue will hit X. And then this way I'll be able to travel more, spend more time with my family, blah, blah.
Exactly.
And but if you ask warrior or a wizard, they will say, or they are more likely to say, well, this way I can expand, I can hire more people, and then I don't have to work in the business as much. I can create more products, more whatever, which is all business oriented. So that's the thing. And so that need suddenly is, you can tell, and from that also you can say, oh, this is more important for them, and then go from there, right?
Yeah, and as a consultant, I might take that a little bit further. You were talking about the wizard, like, well, I'll be able to grow my business. Well, why is that important to you?
Yeah.
Right. What is it that you're trying to get done? Well, I just want to win in the marketplace. Okay, good. What does that look like? Tell me about that. Or, I'm trying to set the business up so I can retire. Gotcha. Okay. What does that look like? And the beauty of this model, Nick, is it doesn't matter what the answer is. I just need to know what your decision motivation is. That's what I need to know.
Yeah.
And so this process unveils that decisioning motivation, and now I'm going to incorporate it into my closing approach.
Yeah. This also reminds me of one of the best TV shows ever, Breaking Bad. I'm sure you've seen, right?
Yeah.
So if you remember, in the early days, they are still cooking in the RV, and he's questioning, how much did you get, and blah blah, and they're making good money. And his young kid says, why are you so aggressive? Look how much we made. And why isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? This is the business we are in, and we making enough money. What else do you want? He says, you don't understand. I'm not in the crystal meth business. What business are you in? I am in the empire building business.
Yeah, exactly.
Money didn't matter, no, nothing. He wants to build his empire. And at the end, actually, this comes completely 100% clear right at the end, very last episode, because whenever his wife gives him a hard time, he says, everything I did for the family. And in the last episode, they are having that final conversation, and that this comes up, and he says, everything I did. And she goes, please do not tell me.
It was for the family.
It was for the family. He says, no, I did it because I felt alive.
Boom, right? And that's what we're looking for in this process, Nick. What is your motivation? If I don't understand your buying motivation, my ability to influence is zero.
Yeah. So uncovering the need, ultimately, that's what we are looking for. What is it's not about solution, it's not about software, it's not about training. It's about, okay, what will that do for you? what will be the impact.
And I love that you said it in that way. And here's just a little tip. I never sell products. I don't. They're one of the, that's the last part of the conversation. I sell solutions. How do we solve your problem? How do we help you achieve your goals? The mechanism by which we do that will be something we talk about, but I'm not focused on that in the moment. I really need to understand what is the real problem that you're trying to solve and what difference does it make? Impact. What difference does it make when it's solved? Let's start there.
This is also a great segue to the next one, creating that real-time solution and an offer. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. And so this is an interesting one for me. From a sales perspective, often what happens then is the order that I present the products in or how I present the product based on the need. That's how the offer gets shaped, the solution gets shaped. And there will be times, and I think this is really important for folks, if you haven't been in this space, be clear about what you can do, but be honest about what you can't do, right? If you don't solve the problem 100%, or if there are gaps in what you can do, be honest and upfront, be proactive about that, set an expectation that there's a gap, be confident in what you can do, and then work to close that gap. Does that mean you need to go find an expert in that particular field? I'll give you an example of this. I was working with a team in a major hospital system. It was the marketing and communications team. And we were working on leadership development. We were working on team cohesion. We were working on helping them restore trust within each other for a lot of different reasons. And in that work, I discovered they're reinventing their processes every time a new project comes in the door. Well, I'm not a process expert. I can do process, I can document process, but I don't like to do that in the first place. But I'm not as good at it as others. And so I recognized that my product, my offering was not going to solve that. And as a result of not solving that, what I was doing for the organization wasn't going to be as effective. We can recreate really good team dynamics and team capacities. But if they're now blocked by the process stuff, their effectiveness isn't going to be as good as it could be. And so first thing I did is I called that out and I said, this is a critical success factor. It is not in scope for me. And so you can solve it for yourself, or I can go find a solution for you. And they said, go find one for us. And so I went and found a process consultant, brought them into the experience, made a deal with my client, and put that person to work to go teach them how to create their own processes. So be honest about where you don't fill it, and then think of that as an opportunity to really add value to the organization without you having to go, invest a bunch of money or build something that you don't already have. So when I look at the solution, I look at how effective is what I'm going to do against your big picture vision? Where are the gaps? Where are we going to be really successful, and what's going to need some extra help? So I'm coming with everything in the kitchen sink when I approach that client around the solution.
So tell me your approach in introducing that missing piece in your service without compromising your strength in the eyes of the warrior or the wizard who will look for strength. How do you bring it into the focus?
Yeah. Again, first of all, warrior wants very direct and concise and performative language, right? Here's what we're going to do. This is what's going to happen. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's when we're going to get it done. And this is what you can expect. That's what they want to hear from you. They're not interested in the relationship building. They're not interested in the details and the research that's been done and how the product was made. They're not interested in any of that. They're not influenced by your excitability or your passion, okay? Like the jester might be. Very direct, very to the point, very business first, and maybe business only. So what you would do is you'd walk in and you'd say, here's what we've been talking about. Here's what I can do for you. Here's what my products are going to do for you. Here's an area that I think you ought to look at. If you look at this area, this product, this gap, probably what's going to happen is we will have an exponential improvement on both sides of the equation. So here's how we help you win. Here's how we help you win more.
I see.
And so it's like very direct, very, again, really bumping up against that line of assertive versus aggressive in how you approach, how you engage, how you communicate. I'm going to solve a problem for you that you didn't even know you had. They love that kind of stuff.
So I can just imagine how much warriors loved when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, said, I'm going to give you something even you don't even know yet that you can't live without.
You don't even know you need this thing. And then a few years later, you can't live without it.
You can't live without it. Yeah. I mean, that is my ultimate example of a vision. Did you used to watch Star Trek?
I did.
I mean, I was obviously very small, but Mr. Spock carried that thing, and it had a little screen. And I thought, oh my God, I wonder if something like this would be possible. And we carry one in our pockets every day now.
Right.
We cannot even prove who we are without our smartphone.
Right. Yeah. And listen, going back to the archetypes, Spock was the wizard, right? And Kirk is the warrior.
Yeah.
You can see the two personality types coming out in the characters.
Yeah. And Dr. McCoy always clashed with Spock.
And what is Dr. McCoy? He's the healer.
Yeah, exactly. Because he deals with always sickness. I mean, doctor, obviously he lives with that every day. Yeah, it's very interesting. Everything comes down to psychology.
To me, it does.
So crafting that solution ultimately, is it the big picture always, or is it the specifics? Because in the case of a warrior, it's the big picture. They're not interested in the details. The wizard is interested in the details, right?
Wizard is absolutely interested in details. I do have a specific response to this that's a little more generic and a little less specific. My goal as a salesperson is to always sell from what I call a top-down perspective. So I want to get to the most senior decision maker I can as fast as possible. But I also want to paint the big strategic, longer-term picture. Even if the person is a wizard who wants the details, I still want to showcase that big picture for them. But then I'm going to emphasize the details and the information need that they have. Sometimes it's an insatiable information need. I'm going to lean in on making sure that they've got the details. And again, I said, good salespeople have that knowledge base that they're bringing into the engagement. They're just understanding who their audience is, and they know how much of it to give. Yeah.
So really, it's the vision ultimately the vision is what you sell, right?
Vision is what I sell.
So Jeff, about real-time solution, making it appeal to the different buyer types. So give us your summary of what are some punchlines on how to go about it, considering the buyer types.
Yeah. And again, I think I'd go back to, it's a very consultative approach. And so I want to give that top line. I want to give the big picture. One of the ways of thinking about this is I want to give the end state. What is the end state when we're done with this? Now, if I were paying attention when I was listening to that decision motivation, I'm going to be able to use that language as I talk about the end state, right? Yeah. Not only are we going to be able to solve the problem, but we're going to get you to retirement sooner, if that's what I heard in the conversation, right? And so I'm absolutely intentionally going to tie those things together. And then I'm going to say, what appeals to you about this, about this solution, and what's potentially giving you pause? Now, what I'm really asking is, what are your objections, if you have any, right? Because I don't want to try to close before I've addressed the objections. That doesn't really make sense to me anyway. To a warrior type, they would immediately go to close, right? I've answered
Yeah.
all your questions. Okay, let's go to close. And that would then create a place where that person would then be giving objections. So we get to the same place. I just try to be a little nicer or gentler about it because of my particular personality type. Then I want to hear your objections. But one of the things that I do, I don't want it to sound like a trick, but it's a technique that I use for wizards in particular, Nick. I'll say something like, here are the 10 questions that you've asked me. I'm going to answer all of those questions for you. Before I do, I'm interested if I answer all 10 of these questions, is there anything else that would prevent you from saying yes? And so I'm starting to ask for a commitment, but in a really early and subtle way. I'm also asking the question because if there are more objections, I want to know that now. What I don't want to do is go through this list of 10 objections and then get 10 more. And so you say, if I answer all 10 of these and I, give the right answer, are there any other objections that might prevent you from saying yes? And if they say no, then I'm already ahead on the closing process.
Yeah.
If they say yes, then it's like, okay, well, let's get those on the list too.
Yeah, that's actually a very smart way. I heard this somewhere. They even have a name for it. So, in other words, this video I saw, person said, do not tackle the objections one at a time. Just tell them. In fact, he used his hand. He said, so just grab it. Just grab it. So you have anything else? Whatever they throw at you, so okay, grab it and put it in the bag. And that's okay. Anything else? Anything else? I'm going to answer every single one of these, but I want to make sure that you tell me all of them, and then I'm going to give it to you one by one.
Yeah.
And just grab. Don't get into, I think he called it like, don't get into a tennis match. And then here,
Right.
you serve one and then I answer and then you serve another one. Don't get into that. Grab
I
everything.
agree with that completely. I think that's a losing proposition where first of all, you're reacting to every objection that comes out. If we can get all the objections out on the table, that allows us to do a couple of things. First of all, we can look for the categories or the themes in the objections. Okay, this one is operational. This one is implementation. This grouping is emotional. Whatever the list is, we can categorize them. And then again, we can come back and we can address from that top-down perspective. These 4 questions were very much about your concern about making a good decision. Let me give you some evidence first that reinforces you're making a good decision. Now let's take them one by one, right? And then we literally just deconstruct the objection from that perspective.
Yeah. Great. So, Jeff, this is almost like a sales training. Like this is really because I have seen, first of all, nobody has ever given me this about 45, 50 minutes of talk condensed like this. There isn't any. I haven't seen anywhere. There's no course. They spread it over several weeks. I mean, of course, you can dig into every one of these, but there is no school for this either, right? So you have to really learn it from the right people. And of course, how do you know who is right? So this is such a great conversation. For me, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I want to now cover what I always call my most favorite part of every episode, where we get to learn about my guest. So we learned from you. So now we're going to learn about you. So tell us about who Jeff Harnois is. So I introduce you, of course, you love Xbox, you love flying, you love. Yeah. But really, I want to understand how Jeff Harnois came to be. So tell us, where did you grow up? Tell us about, growing up as a kid, what it was like.
Yeah, I grew up in sort of both ends of the state of California, and that's significant because they're literally like different cultures and different countries. I started in Southern California. My father was a technician working for a company called TRW, who was a subcontractor to NASA. And so he was doing some technician work on the Apollo space missions. We had a normal home and in a neighborhood and, surrounded by the metropolis. And I think it was probably pretty traditional. But when I was in the third grade, actually right before third grade, we moved up to a little town in the extreme north part of California called Crescent City. So right on the coast, just 20 miles south of Oregon, very small townish. And so there was a lot of culture shock that went on during that move as a small child. But you learn more about relationships and small town values and family and all of that. And that was really good for me, I think, overall. It's where my father also started his first business. And so I got to see him, go through the process of being an employee in a variety of different jobs, relatively low level, certainly, in some cases, not even blue collar, like, labor level. I saw him go from that to being a business owner. And I got to watch him. He started talking about all kinds of things that he had never talked about before, like getting customers and making customers happy and focusing on making sure that they're satisfied and doing a great job and work ethic. And all of that started coming up after he started his own business. And I think that was pretty foundational for me. I remember, car drives with him. I'm in the fourth or fifth grade, and we're talking about the word professionalism and what that means and what it means in the world and how to embody it and how to have those behaviors. Things that I think most fifth graders or sixth graders aren't even thinking about. And for some reason, I was always attracted to those conversations. Whenever they were happening with the adults, I would always perk up and then want to listen in and learn more. Then I got to high school. This is where my first sort of entrepreneurial experience happened. And Nick, I think I've actually told you this story once before, but I'll tell it again. I was in high school. I was probably a sophomore at the time. I had some money because I was working for my dad's business, after hours, and that was good. But I walked into the grocery store and they had a product on clearance. They were selling it. They were never going to sell it again. The product was called Rapples, and it was sheets of caramel with popsicle sticks. And the idea was you go get an apple and you wrap one of these sheets around the apple and you stick your stick in there and you warm it up and now you've got a caramel apple. And they were selling these sheets of 5 for a quarter. And I thought, wow, that looks really good. And so I bought a pack of them and I took them to school and I started selling each sheet for a quarter because kids wanted something sweet and a treat and whatever. And I just opened the package up and they'd take one out and I'd get a quarter. So on a quarter investment, I made $1 for every package that I turned. And so now I took my dollar and I could go buy 4 packages, right? And I just, did that for a while until that inventory was gone. And the experience was just really interesting. It taught me about commerce. It taught me about, inventory. It taught me about investment. And then it taught me about resale, even though that was never on my radar and it wasn't my intention. I was just having fun with it and, making some extra pocket change. But I realized that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the engagement. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed teasing people with them, right, to get them to buy them. It was fun. It was a very fun experience. I left high school. I was still working for my father. And then I left that role and I joined a very small, there's a company out here in California called Beacon Oil. I joined them at the retail level and came up as a technician and worked my way up. And eventually they gave me a store of my own in a place called Vacaville, California. And so I moved my new wife and our new baby out of the Redding area at this point down to the Bay Area. And it was, I call it dumb luck, but it wasn't dumb luck. It was sort of my instincts at play. The store was not performing very well, kind of in a break-even state, had been for a while. They were having lots of issues with turnover and that sort of thing. Now, I have no management training. I have no leadership training. I know nothing about that. And it's actually a new segment of the business that I hadn't even been in before. And I just thought, I just need to go talk to people. The service I was selling was a 10-minute lube and oil service. That was the store that I had taken over. And so I just started talking to people at the gas pumps. I'd go up and say, "Hey, how you doing? Yeah, gosh, we've got this oil special going on." That particular store was doing something like 2 cars in an hour. We had the capacity to do 30 cars in an hour. And so we were doing about 2 cars an hour, and pretty soon people were coming in and they were saying, "Hey, I see you're here. I just wanted to stop by." And I'd say, "You know what? We've got a coupon. We've got a discount for $10 off. Let me just give it to you." Well, I didn't realize that I wasn't supposed to be doing that the marketing department wanted people to go find the coupon and then bring it in. And what I was doing was I was giving discounts to everybody. "Hey, here's a coupon for today, 10 bucks off," or whatever. Well, in addition to that, which was really focused on the customer, I was very focused on the team. Listen, back to that conversation around professionalism from my dad. Like, we're going to up-level the level of professionalism and how we talk to and treat our customers. We're going to change their oil, but we're going to give them a really good experience in doing it. We're going to vacuum out their car, and we're going to educate them on the process, and we're going to be positive. And so people were coming in, they were getting this discount on the service, and then they were getting treated really well. Well, it didn't take long. In the first quarter, we went from 2 cars a day to 10 cars a day. In quarter after that, we were doing 25 cars a day, and then we were at 35 cars a day. And so that business just blew up. And when I would sit in the managers meetings, people would say, "How'd you do it?" And I would tell them, and they're like, "You're not supposed to do that." I was like, "Right, right." But I did do it, and it worked. And this business is absolutely flourishing. And so I developed this reputation for being the turnaround guy. And so they moved me to the Santa Clara store, so right here in Silicon Valley. And they said, "Gosh, we've had a lot of problems with theft." And they turned over the entire store. All the employees were fired. And that's the point they brought me in to take over. So now I had to run the store. It was a 12-hour operation, 7 days a week. And I had to hire people and train them and all of that in the process. And had a very similar outcome, got a really great team in place, boosted the volume way more than they were ever expecting. And while that was happening, I wasn't getting paid enough to live in the Bay Area, a very expensive place to live. And so I knew my wife was going to have to work. And everybody who came through the door I said to them, "Hey, what do you do? Where do you work? Are they hiring?" And one day this woman came through and she said, "Well, I work at a place called Apple Computer." Apple had been public for 2 years at that point. "I work at Apple, and I'm hiring bilingual and trilingual people in HR." And she's like, "Yeah, let me talk to your wife." And next thing you know, my wife is working there. Well, my wife got hired at Apple as the receptionist, and I was only making $400 a month more than she was, doing 3 times the work. And I thought, "Well, this isn't gonna work for me anymore." And so then I made my approach and I got hired on at Apple. It's important to know that I did not have any college experience at that point. And I joined a Fortune 50 company that was in growth mode. Jobs was still at the helm, working with hyper smart, hyper talented people. And I'm coming from a podunk town in California that was farm country. And so a lot of adaptations had to be made, a lot of hustle had to come out, and that became a really good, sort of starting point for me in my career. From Apple, I joined another Fortune 50 company. I really hope you appreciate this one, Nick, because it really ties back to everything we've been talking about today. While I was at Apple, I got my Myers-Briggs done. It was an epiphany for me. It was like a lightning rod went through me. I understood myself in ways I didn't before. I started to see areas where I was valuable that I didn't see before. And so I worked through my career at Apple. When I left Apple, I went to go work for another Fortune 50 company as the VP of sales for the technology division. Well, here's something interesting. I didn't have a sales job before that. I was a product manager and I was a program manager. What happened? I used my psychometrics to be able to influence people into a really great role. Then once I was there, I was selling at the enterprise level. Again, zero experience selling enterprise, zero experience selling the product I was selling, zero experience selling. And I ended up closing $100 million deal with AT&T Wireless while I was in that role. And it just sort of solidified everything we've been talking about. The ability to read people, to understand their information needs, to understand, what and how to influence was absolutely the key to that success. And so then from there, I had a couple of other corporate jobs. I started up a technology firm with a friend. That was my first, true entrepreneurial event. Gosh, we ended up closing $1 million in business with Cisco Systems. Sold that off to my partner, did a couple of other corporate jobs, started up a mortgage banking firm in Minnesota, sold that off to my partner there, went back to corporate. And then ultimately in 2017, I founded iBridge. And initially we started off as an executive career coaching firm. I wanted to help my clients understand how to market themselves, how to articulate their value proposition, and was so successful with that business, we ended up turning off all of our outbound marketing and advertising and became referral only. And to this day, we are still referral only on that side of the house. And then ultimately, we were building these high trust relationships with our clients. And I thought, where do we go from here? And that's when we got into the executive development, executive communication, executive presence, team cohesion, that whole ecosystem about how do we elevate teams for success. And that's the space that we're in now today.
Well, I mean, it's the whole journey you had. And what's interesting is you ended up doing something that you never thought was your
Right.
strength. And it's true. Once you understand, I had a similar situation, not with my work, but with my personality. And it suddenly you realize that things that you almost feel guilty for being the way you are, you realize that, oh, this is actually who you are, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it's your strength.
It's your
And
strength.
yeah, for me, that was, I tell you what mine was, nothing to do with the what you went through. It is the concept of third culture kid.
Yeah.
So these are people who spend, the definition is those who spend more of their adult years outside of their parents' culture. Typically military brads, diplomats' kids, they keep moving around. So they constantly change schools, therefore building friendships become harder. But you know what it is? When you ask third culture kid, where are you from? Oh my God, you put them in a tailspin. They have no idea how to answer because they don't identify with one
Right.
place. And
Right.
that's the kind of stuff I would go through because I moved around, and certain things are like they are thinking in terms of like setting a time. They're always thinking multiple time zones because they are in touch with multiple. In America, at least there are multiple time zones is part of it, but someone who lives in a country like, for example, England or Germany or France, there's only one time zone. That's what they're still thinking. So that's when I learned that I was, in fact, a third culture kid. And what I thought always gave me pressure with answers, that was my strength. And once I embraced it, the whole, how you feel about going about living changes, right? So it's yeah. Well, I'm not even going to open any conversations about flying or Xbox because that can go on forever. So I think we've got so much from you, and I don't want to hold you anymore. So tell us, Jeff, how can people reach you, and also tell us about your podcast, what
Yeah.
it's called, and how people can tune in.
Yeah, thank you for that. So probably the best way to reach me would be a message on LinkedIn, but you also can go to my website, which is www.ibridged.com. And I think there's a button there where you can schedule a discovery session with me if you're interested in having a conversation around that. My podcast is called Transformational Leadership. I'm also in the process of writing a book with the same name. And it really does focus on, what is your current state? How do you assess it? How do you think about it? What is your desired state? And then what happens in between those two places? We go deep into things like trust and conflict and commitment, accountability and results. We talk about psychometrics in all of those. We talk about psychological resistance that, may help someone unlock some of the resistance that's holding them back from actually achieving a transformation. So that's coming. The podcast, same name, Transformational Leadership. We were talking to senior HR folks, CHROs, chief people officers, VP of HR, sometimes directors of HR. We also have some business owners and business leaders talking about transformation from their perspectives. So if you want to join the show and nerd out with us on stories around transformation and some really, really interesting conversations, I would welcome you to sign in and have a listen.
Yeah, well, I mean, this conversation is an example of how you handle these conversations that actually do transform your thinking, how you approach things. It's a great conversation, Jeff. Always love talking to you and always learning something. And thank you for being here. Thank you.
Nick, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, the honor is mine. And this brings us to the end of this episode. There'll be plenty more. And don't forget to tune into Jeff's podcast, subscribe, and you will not regret it. And I'll see you on the next one.
Audacity of Entrepreneurs podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.